Welcome to Ojas Oasis. This is a place where you will learn how to optimize your body, mind, and spirit in ways you have longed for a long time, perhaps your entire life. Our mission is to help you cultivate, nourish, and protect your ojas, your immunity, and inner peace. You were one of my first, teachers of Ayurveda, and you still are probably one of the most influential people in my life. And the reason I've been wanting you on the podcast, so I've been so persistent and so kind of like lovingly nudging you to want to come on, is first of all, one of the great parts of having a podcast is I get to kind of curate who to talk to, I just get to talk to really, really interesting people in our community, and I get to just basically shine a light on how much I admire them. So for the next minute or so, allow me the honor of introducing you, because you, Ryan Strong, everybody, is one of my Vidyas, one of my Jyotishis. He's one of my, I don't know, just one of my guides in my life that like I continually kind of, when I think I'm losing my way, or when I get overwhelmed with the path and I don't know if I'm doing it right or if I've completely lost it, or Ryan has been this like really steadfast. I should just speak to you directly, but I'm also talking to listeners. Ryan, it's hard to explain to someone who, oh gosh, I hope I don't just start bawling, but um, I just want to take the opportunity, I guess, to say thank you, because you've held this standard from the beginning, from day one, with how you show up. It's not just what you're teaching. It's not just, and which you teach really well. You're so clear, and you make the knowledge of Ayurveda, even Jyotish. I mean, sometimes when we have our sessions and you're explaining to me my chart, you're explaining to me just like bigger macrocosmic concepts, and you just do such an incredible job of distilling it down. But also your presence and the quality of your energy, which I believe you've cultivated through so many years of obviously self-study, but also your practices, your meditation, your discipline, your dinacharya. And I'm sure one area that you and I have yet to really, really sort of take the like dive into is the Kriya Yoga that you've been practicing. And so that I was really curious about, like, how does Ryan so consistently show up with this sattvic, sweet, like loving presence, and always calm too. Like that's the other part, is that you're always calm. And I know like life is not inherently always calm. So I was always like curious of how you manage to just so consistently not only show up as a teacher, but also a person. And you've been so generous with your energy and with your light, and you've made such a profound imprint on me. So as a as a student, but also as just like as a person, I just want to say thank you so much.
You're welcome, and I should meet this person you're talking about. Always calm and centered. No, thanks, Sasha.
I mean, even if it doesn't feel like it, or even if you don't realize how you're being received by others, I think that's a really important reminder and reflection that is how you are seen and received. And that's, by the way, I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of every student probably that you've ever had, and every client that you've ever had, because it's very much a unanimous vote, Ryan, that you are a gift to this world.
Oh,
So
all right, that's enough of that.
Yeah.
I appreciate. I really do appreciate you.
Yeah, we love you.
Thank you.
We really, really like love and cherish you. So, on that note, welcome to the podcast. Ryan Strong, everybody, is an Ayurvedic doctor. He's an herbalist. He teaches all around the world. He's a spiritual guide. He's the head of the what is it like? He's a disciple of Roy Eugene Davis, who is a direct disciple of Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, and we can get into what all of that means in a moment. No better person on this, I don't think, earth to better explain it than Ryan Strong. But what else? Yeah, I mentioned that you're a Vedic astrologer, and yeah, okay, let's get into it. You do panchakarmas. You have a clinic in Sacramento, um, and yeah, I think the first like question I always love to start with for everyone is, how did the Vedas find you, or how did you find the Vedas?
Yeah. Well, I think, because was thinking about the question, and my mom had a couple of Yogananda's books, Paramahansa Yogananda's books, on her shelf when I was growing up. I didn't know anything about him, except that he just had this. There's this picture of him on one of the books. It was called Man's Eternal Quest, and so Yogananda standing with his arms crossed, and he just looked kind of stoic, but also at peace. And so I kind of gravitated towards that book. Um, and so I think that, like, around the age of like 17, 18, that's really when it began for me.
17,
Yeah.
18. So it was just a book.
Yeah.
You saw the book and it was magnetic. Something magnetized you to that
Well,
book.
yeah. Well, like, I think like a lot of teenagers, and maybe a little bit more for me than others, I was pretty wild. I had real close, like friends, but they were like brothers. They were like a second family. And we were always up to no good.
Mm-hmm.
and um, and it was pretty wild. But no matter what was going on in my life, ups and downs, as a teenager, I had that book, and I kept it under my bed. I didn't want anyone to know. Certainly not my friends, but I would take that book out and just open it up, and no matter what I was going through, it was like I would just read a sentence or two, and it just helped me out. And and then one of my friends was staying with me, and he actually found the book, and he was reading it one day, and he's like, "Hey, this is really good stuff." And like, just by hearing, I looked up to him, and by him saying that, um, for whatever reason, I just kind of engaged in reading a little bit more. So I was one day I was reading that book, and not really understanding what I was reading or what was happening, but I felt this like surge of energy kind of rise up from the base of my spine several times, from the base up. And it wasn't scary or anything, but it was very noticeable. And when I stopped what I was doing and I got up, I felt like I was taller. I wasn't, but it was just a sensation like I was taller. And that was a life-changing moment, because everything that I was kind of, I was a kid, really. I was 17, but I had my friends, and I had my behaviors, and I had my dreams, and, thinking, applying for schools and all this kind of stuff, thinking about that life. And suddenly it just all shifted. I,
Wow.
it made me change directions. And it took me a couple of years, actually, to kind of figure out what was going on. But it just gave me the way I would look at it, the way I would try to describe it. And I think you understand this, and most people do. It's like when you get on your path, or you are called to it, or you have a spiritual awakening of some type. It's like you go into a place of like you're remembering something. It's like, oh,
Mm.
I kind of remember something, and this is really important. And what I'm remembering feels like there's a best friend that I've lived 1,000 lives with, and I love them, but I don't really remember them, but I know them, and I have to find them. So it's like almost like this energy of like this beloved, you know. And so when that came up, nothing else was like satisfying. The idea of going to school and this, I just had to figure it out. But it was kind of confusing and it took time, you know.
That's
Yeah.
that's incredible. And I feel like just to meet you in that same place, like I remember the word I remember hearing the word Ayurveda for the first time and how it
Yeah.
kept penetrating
Right.
this memory bank that was like inexplicable to anyone around me. I couldn't really it wasn't something you could explain logically or um, even with words like that. That would have been really, really. I don't know. It was for
Yeah.
me. It was, you know, the way that I've always explained it is it's like if God was calling you on the phone, it's as resonant as a phone ringing. Like it sounds like it's like, hey, this is God. You're gonna go study Ayurveda now, or hey Ryan, like this is Yogananda. Remember me? Yeah. So you're gonna carry on this lineage tradition. So hope you're cool with that. That's your job. That's your task for this incarnation.
Right. Just like when you first read Ayurveda, your mind, your brain hadn't developed the concept. So that's why it's kind of confusing. You're like Ayurveda, there's something here, but what is it? And it was the same thing with Yogananda. I knew kind of what Buddhism was, and I had a sense of spirituality and that kind of stuff, but I had no idea that yoga was a philosophy or a spiritual path. You know, I had no
Mhm.
clue. But you're right. It's like getting that call, and it's like, who do I call back? Where do I
There's no
go?
callback number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a
It's
magnetic
like
pull within my being, but and we can trust that, I guess. It can work out. But in the very beginning, it's exciting. It lights you up, but it can take a while to figure it out.
that energy that you were describing at the base of your spine that was your Kundalini rising, right?
Well, that's what um, we could maybe say that's what it was. Um,
Hmm.
it's and it probably was, but it uh, interestingly enough, once I'd been studying with Roy Eugene Davis, my spiritual teacher, for about 10 years, and he wrote a book. He wrote lots, but he wrote a book called Yogananda as I Knew Him, and um, and he shared a story because he was 17 when he found autobiography of a yogi, and he had had rheumatic fever, and he had spent a year in bed at home, and being at home, and he was reading a lot of books from the library and this kind of stuff, and trying to heal himself. Anyways, he wrote about how he was reading autobiography of a yogi, and the same thing happened to him. And I had never told him, I never shared that story with him, and so I was able to connect with them and share that happened. So I think it's something that happens, and it is special. I'm glad it happened, but um, there's nothing truly unique about it.
Hmm. It's
Yeah,
one of my favorite books. I should also mention that it's a really good book to rem- for me. It like brings me. First of all, it's so detailed. Like Yogananda is an incredible writer, linguist. I mean, he's like a poet. The way he describes his experiences of yoga throughout his life, and uh, it's so like, the imagery. It's just so incredibly like just you feel like you're there.
yeah,
The way he writes, and it takes me there to that time, and it really helps me experience what he's experiencing in a way that like almost no other writer's been able to do that I've
yeah,
read. Um, so the book, the way it's written, is it's like impossible to not believe what's happening because of how he accounts for every skeptic, every doubt that a reader might have. He's sure to like at the bottom, he's always like listing his witnesses or the date, the time, the place, who was there. I mean, it's really like an eyewitness account of like, look, magic is real. Like there's no way to
Yeah,
refute.
yeah. Well, uh, I do. I hear exactly what you're saying, but at the same time, um, there are stories in there that are retold, and the autobiography, like the essence of it, the energy of it, is so beautiful and inspiring. And that's its job. I mean, it's been published in 50 different languages at this point, and it was originally published in 1946, and from then to now, it remains to be still a number one bestseller. Right, so that book has so much energy and has so much. It has inspired so many people to different things, not just to Kriya Yoga or Ayurveda or Jyotish, and all that's mentioned in there, but to just their spiritual path or being open to other ideas. One of the issues, though, as we go into modern times, is that there is a little. I would just would I'll put it this way: like some of it is fantastic, right, and
Mm,
it has that fantastic energy, and that's good. But sometimes people read that and they'll associate their spiritual path with these, like, these real fantastic or almost they'll imagine something to be a certain way because they'll have read that, and then they feel like they're not progressing, they're not growing their awareness, and
mm,
because they're waiting for the big magic, they're waiting to see the masters, they're waiting to
yeah,
have these experiences, those experiences can come and people can experience them, but they're not important. Patanjali even
right.
writes about that in the sutras. It's um, anyways, I'm going on about that too much, but yeah, it's a great book, isn't it?
No, it makes sense. I mean, it's such a I mean, it's a best-selling book and it's such a popular book for a reason. There's a, like you said, there's a lot of energy in the book. He put a lot
Yeah,
of his, you know, power. I mean, or shock. You could call it shakti, or I don't know.
yeah,
His sattva, his consciousness, his love. He put,
yeah,
just so you can, you know, yeah. It's easy to say like, well, the spiritual path doesn't necessarily look like this, and maybe this shouldn't be like the model for what everyone's going to experience. But at the same time, it, like you said, the fact that it's inspiring people to pursue any type of spiritual path, it, for me it's a win. But I can
yeah.
also see
Well,
how some
absolutely.
people might, I could see how some people would also be like, oh, I was expecting to see, you know
Oh
the
yeah, I've
you know
met people on the Kriya Yoga path for, like, they've been on it for 30 years, and they're like waiting for Babaji to show up.
Babaji. I was going to say Mahababaji, like, oh,
Mhm.
why
Yeah,
isn't, I went to the mountains, I went to the Himalayas, he wasn't there. What is
right.
this? Like, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's, and that, even what you were describing with the energy at the base of your spine as you were reading it, I didn't get that necessarily when I read it. So I was like, oh, did I miss something, or like, did I not get the what did I do wrong, right? Like, we always think, oh, we must have done something incorrectly to not have experienced it in the same way. But I think it's really
well, I wasn't
important
even
to
reading the
always,
autobiography. I
yeah.
I wasn't reading the autobiography. I hadn't even had. It took me 10 more years before I even read that. I
Oh,
was that day. I had two books. One was Man's Eternal Quest, which was just some talks that he gave. But when I had that initial experience, I was reading a book called Whispers from Eternity. Whispers from Eternity, and it's a really beautiful book of prayers, of different prayers for different lineages, for different religions, this kind of thing. So I was actually reading that. Yeah.
mm,
And if you don't have
okay.
it, you want to get that. It's beautiful.
Any book that you recommend is going to go on my list.
Yeah,
So,
Whispers from Eternity.
Whispers from Eternity sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So, back to your journey, Ryan, when you found the Vedas, so you were quite young, and then did it start with yoga and then go into Ayurveda later? what was like the order
Yeah.
that
Yeah. So
you
I had that
explored?
experience. Yeah. Yeah. So I had that experience that I was mentioning before, and I was in my last year of high school. And so uh, I had to find out who Yogananda was, because after that I started having these dreams about being with him, or it felt like memories, like, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. And I had that like feeling, that beloved feeling I was talking about, like wanting to, I have to go find him, right? And but he had his Mahasamadhi, or he left his body, he passed away in 1952, right? And here it is when this is happening for me, it's 1999. And so so I had this, it was a really weird disconnect, and it took years for that to go away. Like I felt like I had to go find him, but where is he? So there was like it was like a disconnect, cognitive dissonance. So
Mhm, mhm,
even though I knew he wasn't there, I still felt like I had to go find him. And so I the back of the book, it said SRF, so I wrote to them. Yogananda had set up an organization called the Self-Realization Fellowship. So
mhm,
I wrote to them and got involved, and they started sending me all these lessons. And so I was taking these lessons, and I one of the things they sent me was a brochure to be a monk, right? To like take the vows and go live as a yogi. And I saw that, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And as soon as I get out of high school, I'm going to do this. So I actually applied. They had these forms and they asked you, like, do you have any animals? How much debt are you in? They ask you all these questions. And so I filled all that out, and I was so excited. I didn't tell any of my family or friends. It was like a secret, you know. Or my girlfriend, she would have liked to have known that at the time, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm
wow,
gonna go become a
yeah,
monk. But the letter never, the application form, just waiting for it. And a week went by, and 2 weeks went by, three. And I was just waiting and waiting. And I remember I would always go out to the mailbox to get it. And finally, a reply did come, and it was, I don't know, like 8 weeks later or something. It was a long time, and it was in a cellophane envelope from the post office. It was torn to pieces, so it was shredded, and it was inside of a little see-through kind of plastic envelope from the post office. And the post office had a note on it that said, "Sorry, one in every 14,000, letters or whatever end up this way." And the only thing that you could read was the corner, and it said corporate mail. So it said corporate on it, and I remember that really stuck out to me. It said corporate. Um, but I was a little bit crushed. I didn't reapply, and I felt like it was, in my mind it was like, oh, and a lot of people call Yogananda master, and I
mhm.
thought, oh, master doesn't want me. I
Aw,
felt yeah, I felt rejected, or whatever. And so then, finishing up high school, I got involved with this nonprofit organization that brought clothing and medical supplies and things like this to orphanages in Mongolia. So I worked last year of high school. I was working for them, and then I went to Mongolia. And of course, I brought Yogananda's Man's Eternal Quest with me, and it was starting to fall apart. um, but it was when I got back from Mongolia, and um, Mongolia was an amazing experience. But I was not prepared at all to see the level of suffering, especially with like babies and children. I thought it'd be a fun experience, an adventure to go over there, and it was amazing. But I wasn't prepared to see the things that I saw, you know especially around suffering. So when I got back home, I had an apartment, I had this great job making all this money, but I was completely unsatisfied. I just after have excuse me, after I had been part of that experience, and I came home, and I just wasn't satisfied with what I was doing, and I felt really confused about the level of suffering in the world. You know, like, like, how can this happen kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And I was having a really hard day, and I called my mom, you know, and I said, "Mom, I don't feel so good," and I was telling her what I was going through, and um, she said, "You'll never forget." She said, "Ryan, you're a spiritual being, or you're a spiritual person, and you're not on your path. You need to get on your path." And in that day, I mean, she said really meant something to me, and I had read somewhere before, um, that if you needed a guru, you just needed to pray deeply. Go to a mountain and pray deeply for your guru, right? Because at that point, I had accepted or started to accept that Yogananda was no longer here, but I also knew I needed a teacher. I wasn't going to be able to learn from a book or these kind of things. I knew I needed, or I desired an actual teacher. So after talking to her, I went out to a mountain near my house, and I brought Whispers from Eternity. Had an apple and some water, and I sat there and I just prayed as deep as I could to find a teacher, to find my path. And as silly and kind of cheesy as it sounds, that's what I did. And it was on my way home back to my apartment from the mountain. I had this like insight that kind of bubbled up, and the insight, it wasn't like words, but the way I'll describe it is with words. And this inner voice, if you will, said, that Yogananda left people behind. Yogananda left teachers, and there's one out there for you. It was like that. And so I said, oh yeah, maybe. So what I did that day, I went to the internet. And back then, the internet was very slow. It was all dial up, that kind of thing. And I just started researching disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda. And back then, Yogananda had passed away in 52. He had his organization, but there were other people that studied with him, and they had lineages, right? And so I just dug in deep to find out who's out there teaching, and read about a bunch of people. But I went on to Roy Eugene Davis's website, and as soon as his picture, populated, because the dial-up is the pictures back then. You click on it, and it would take 3 to 5 minutes sometimes for the picture to appear. It'd be all pixelated,
Wow.
and it would
I
slowly come
remember
in.
that.
So yeah. So I saw his picture, or kind of populate, and I knew then that he was. I just knew. I was like, that's my guru. That's my teacher. And I wrote to him. I wrote him this whole long letter, you know, and he never wrote back. He never wrote back. And so it was another experience where I was like, oh, I guess that's not going to work out, and didn't quite understand. But um, a few months later, I did receive a flyer saying that Roy, or Mr. Davis, was going to be speaking in Phoenix, and I lived in Flagstaff, about 2 hours away. And so it was, it was like in the future, months and months in the future. So, and because he didn't write back and everything, I thought, well, maybe I'm not going to go, you know, and maybe this isn't for me, that kind of thing. But that same day, I was at a bookstore, and a used bookstore, and right on the right at the bookstore, there was one of Roy's books. I opened it, and he had hand wrote "Blessings, Roy," and so I took that as a sign. And so that's kind of the short version of how I found Kriya Yoga. And in that book that day, to answer your question more specifically, that day, the book it was called The Path of Light. And so I went home and I just started reading the whole thing. And in there was a whole section on Ayurveda. And it was exactly how you described it. Like the first time I read that word, it was like something popped, a light bulb went off, and I was like, there's something really important about this that that I have to learn about as well.
Mhm.
Much to the surprise of my family, telling your family, I'm going to go study Kriya Yoga and the science called Ayurveda, and they're like, can't you just make that a hobby? you know, College age, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, how when you say the word yoga to most people, I guess in the West, they think there's only one type of yoga, and an image pops up in their mind of what yoga is. Like they have this modernized version of yoga, and they may not realize that yoga is so much more than wearing Lululemon pants and going to a yoga asana class, with the intent to look good, right? Like the outcome is you're going to have a fit body, right? Or you're going to become more flexible, so you'll be strong and flexible, and just the stereotype is just kind of interesting to me, how yoga has evolved, like this word. So for listeners that are completely new to yoga, when we say Kriya Yoga, maybe we should just define maybe we should define that first, and
Mm-hmm.
also kind of go through like the different paths, because I know there's many different paths, yoga paths like bhakti yoga and karma yoga. So how would you define Kriya Yoga?
Yeah. So, excuse me. Kriya itself has many meanings, but the used in this context, it means action or steps taken, right? And yoga means to yoke or to combine, right? And so Kriya Yoga is actions taken to combine or to yoke, which really means to get to the real definition of it, yoga, the word itself speaks to a truth that there's one being, there's one consciousness, there's one thing that is. And when, as a little individual self, we feel separate from it, right? Or we have a perception of being, you know, ourself with our story and our experiences and our body, these kind of things. And so the path of yoga is to really shift that viewpoint, because that feeling of being separate is just a temporary condition of our awareness. And so yoga is the shifting of that awareness to experience, not to imagine, but to experience our oneness, our to kind of abide in that creation, and we can call it creation consciousness. My guru often called it absolute consciousness. Some people call it God or Brahma. One of my favorite descriptions is the Almighty, because it's so vast from our little perception. But yoga is to remove the veil which fragments or blurs our awareness, to be restored to its natural pure state. So Kriya is all the actions that we take to shift that viewpoint so that we can abide in the essence of our being and the truth of what this life is.
Beautiful. And those practices, were those taught to you by your guru, or was it something that you first read about and started on your own, or were you pretty certain that it was a path that you needed to learn directly from a teacher, from a guru?
Yeah, I had gotten books and tried to study as much as I could, but I knew that I needed a teacher. All right,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely knew that, and so the books were helpful, but it really wasn't until I was with my teacher, and I spent years studying with him, and I was lucky he would offer these retreats, and so I would go and spend about 3 weeks with him every May, and then when I got older, I'd go out there twice a year, and whenever he was traveling or anything, I would go see him. So I got to spend a lot of time with them, and it was his consciousness, because when someone has experienced something and then they teach you about it, and they're clear with the descriptions and that kind of thing, definitions, It's really helpful. So I needed that. And so my true study didn't begin until I was with him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Would you want to share some of the like first practices you learned, or
Yeah.
what
Oh
you
yeah,
would
absolutely.
recommend, even, and also like new students to it, like if someone came to you and wanted to learn Kriya Yoga? Because I don't know of many yoga studios that offer Kriya Yoga. I don't hear Kriya mentioned as often. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's out there, and that's a really good point. So like Kriya Yoga, is actually kind of a generic term. Actions taken for
mhm,
yoga, and so there's a lot of people that offer what is called Kriya Yoga, and that's good. So when I'm referring to it, I'm specifically talking about the Kriya Yoga that Paramahansa Yogananda brought to the United States in the 1920s, and he had learned it from his teacher, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and he had studied from his teacher, Lahiri Mahashaya. So, so, um, so it's a lineage of teachers that have students that pass it on into the future. And the most important initial practice is to learn to meditate and to be consistent with meditation. And with Kriya Yoga, there are techniques that are taught upon being initiated, and there's many different lineages. Imagine all the different teachers that have passed this forward. They had students, and they had lineages. So the last time I checked, just from Lahiri Mahashaya, there's 60 distinct lineages in our Kriya Yoga family. And so some of the techniques are taught a little bit different in different places. And when Yogananda came to the United States, he simplified them for Westerners, right? And so Kriya Yoga is a comprehensive approach to life, right? So there's the techniques that you can learn that are very helpful upon initiation. Initiation is just a formal commitment. It's a new beginning. And so when people prepare themselves and they're initiated, that can really begin them in a way that's helpful for them. But um, but Kriya Yoga itself, it's a combination, like you were saying before. It's bhakti, it's jnana, it's karma yoga, it's hatha yoga, and raja yoga, and it's all combined. And so it's a comprehensive program. um, that's kind of a silly word, but it's the one
mhm,
that works the best. It's comprehensive. So it's when you're on the Kriya Yoga path, it's a spiritual path, and everything you do is a part of it. But the initial practices is to learn to just sit. Right? And that's one of the hardest things that anyone can learn to do. It's easier for some than others, but it's so worth it to learn to just sit and let your nervous system calm down, and then to go into a place of awareness where you're not interacting with your thoughts. You can go into stillness, but sometimes you just go into a place where they're there, but you're not interacting with them. And beginning that process it's life changing. It's phenomenal, and going deeper into that is incredibly helpful. And the truth is, it's like, so with just by sitting and really allowing everything to settle and being awake and aware, and engaging in that pure being. um, Yoga is self-revealing. Spirituality is self-revealing. It doesn't have to have a special name, and it can go by many, many names, right? It's about our reality. It's about what is. And and so it is self-revealing. It's good to have teachers. It's really important for some, but anyone that's just dedicated to becoming spiritually awake, they can do that on their own. Because um, if, as they say, the saints and sages say, that there's one reality, and that all knowledge of that reality is within it, then that is within you, right? And so um, just by engaging in the right way and being focused in on it, you automatically learn bhakti. You automatically engage in jnana. And bhakti is often defined as surrender, but it's devotion. It's letting go of this false sense of control that we have, that I'm in control, and what am I controlling? I'm controlling all my fears and worries, and so we're holding on, and it's creating all these blocks, and so true bhakti is just letting go of that false sense of control. And then in that, when we really practice it, in that, um, we suddenly have this like faith, this energy that kind of bubbles up within us, and it's like everything's going to be okay. I'm not sure how, but everything is going to be okay, right? And when we fully surrender in this way, we end up just automatically practicing ahimsa and automatically practicing karma yoga, being in alignment. So, anyways, it's so meditation, learning to meditate, give it time, find a teacher if you need. And there's a lot of things that are called meditation, but meditation where you're sitting and you're using a technique, if needed, to quiet the mind and then to just go into that pure state of being and hold it as long as you can, and then do that once or twice a day. That's a good beginning practice.
For someone with really high vata or really high pitta or combo
Yeah.
pack, because a lot of us have that, I mean, myself included, the vata pitta combination, how would we set that person up for success? Like, is there a certain set of conditions that would ensure a successful sit that isn't just them sitting and thinking about their stresses and worrying and, you know, overthinking, like just basically um, putting them in a place where they're unable to calm their mind down and it actually gets worse, or um, maybe they have, like, you know a lot of stored trauma and their nervous system is just unable to feel safe in their body. So, you know as a initial step, how can we prepare someone to go into a practice of sitting? Because it's a very simple practice, and it's a very simple, like, okay, basic step to like begin the path, but it doesn't mean it's easy. It's actually
Right.
right. And you kind of hinted at that too. It's like some people have a tough time with it. um, but I think, given, I'm sure you see a ton of clients all the time, and you have a ton of students with a lot of vata pitta dysregulation in their nervous system and dysregulation in the mind as well. How can we meet people at that point and give them and tailor it to the needs that they have, knowing that sitting in their body is going to be a difficult thing for them to do, and just
Absolutely.
being.
And yeah, and that's where like we were talking about before, like having someone like for me, having Roy in my life, you know, he was able to direct me in specific ways for me that helped me. Right. So yoga is always meant to be that way, just like Ayurveda. Right now, um, I mentioned before someone gets initiated, sometimes it's good to prepare. Right. And there's no set rule of time, but the intention of that time period is to work on the lifestyle, right? So if someone has a vata, pitta, kapha combination of all three, a bunch of ama, that's this kind of stuff going on, to give it 6 months to sort of work on that while you're developing, being able to sit and starting to develop your cognitive abilities to understand the philosophy. So that's really helpful, but it needs to be specific. Yeah. And if someone has a strong doshic imbalance, that kind of needs to be addressed on some level. Because if you have too much kapha, it's so hard to meditate. It's like you're trying to meditate through a brick wall, raising up,
Mm.
trying to raise your awareness into higher brain centers, and you're just like down here stuck.
Mm.
If there's a strong pitta imbalance, the person can just really feel like there's too much to do, too much to accomplish to sit very long, right? And obviously vata is going to be just all over the place. It's like trying to calm the mind is like trying to throw the brakes on a train that's traveling at 150 miles an hour, or trying to control the wind, right? And so we begin, but it's real important to address the doshic imbalance, the lifestyle. Just being regular with sleep is so powerful. Regular with sleep, regular with meals, and eating a good diet that's healthy for that person. That has amazing. It's so simple, but has amazing supportive qualities. But then you mentioned something before, like trauma. You know, deep-seated trauma, especially trauma that affects our nervous system, like like PTSD or CPTSD, which is basically the same thing, but the C represents childhood, right? And so if there's this kind of stuff, then it's a really important idea to find a good therapist or counselor to work with some of that stuff as you're going into the practices. They don't um, they complement. They can really complement one another, and it's often important.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
I always like to pause because I know you're really good at this. You're really good at taking time in between each thought and giving it like a moment to digest. It's another thing. I remember before you would come teach, you would meditate in the car. After you taught, you would meditate. Like you wouldn't, it was never, you were never in a rush from either like one point to the next or like one place or one, it was always you gave space, in between things. And that has stuck
I
with
was
me
just
actually.
sleeping.
No. You were probably like, projecting outside your body and, you know,
No, no. I was
floating.
I was I was I was working on my own vata.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the vata of life, and it's been such a long time goal of mine to be a meditator because it's almost like there's just at this point there's no reason not to. And there's every reason to do it. And somehow you're right. It's really something that was meant to be passed on by a teacher. And there's reasons for that. And I would love for you to share why you think having an embodied teacher is probably one of the most important aspects of learning Kriya Yoga. Um,
Yeah. Well, it was for me. It was for
mm,
me. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it is for everyone. You know, it's one. There's this one thing that we abide in, and it has so many different. It's one thing, but it has infinite forms in infinite ways, right? But like going back to meditation, it took me 2 years. Once I learned to meditate, the practice, it took me 2 years before I actually experienced it. I thought I was meditating and then actually experienced meditation. I go, oh, that's what I was supposed to be doing. Right. And to be regular with it, it was incredibly difficult. It took me a long time. And so, um, but the benefit of having having Roy in my life was just this constant reminder. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Right. Because the hardest, I would say the biggest obstacle that we face beyond our individual issues and all the stuff in life is that for whatever reason, and maybe it's partly the yuga that we're in, the time period that we're in, but our awareness, our consciousness is kind of suppressed a little bit or a lot. And so we are very forgetful, right? We are for the path of yoga is just the path of remembering, and until we fully remember, we're constantly going, I'm forgetting, oh, I'm remembering, I'm forgetting, I'm remembering, that kind of thing. And so having a teacher to constantly remind you, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, this is why you're doing it, this is how you do it, and then being able to sit with them. I think that was the most important thing. um, he taught yoga for over 60 years, Kriya Yoga, and he was a very devoted and deep meditator, as was Yogananda. Yogananda, they promoted Yogananda promoted more of the sitting with people and meditating deeply with them and sharing that experience than the teachings themselves. The teachings were really important, but it was to, he said, dye them in the wool of Kriya Yoga, and he's talking about meditating with them, right? And so, like, I would sit with Roy, and my mind would be all over the place, or I'd be tired, not able to get into that stillness. But you just sit there and you wait and you wait, and you just, this it's hard to describe, but you just feel this calm, warm energy to start to radiate and pulsate in the temple or in the meditation hall. And so by having a teacher, they remind you, they keep you motivated, ideally, and then by being in their awareness, being in their presence, meditating with them, um, and it's a little bit of, like you were mentioning before, it's Shakti, right? So
Mm.
when you're with that person, you're getting their Shakti, and they got that Shakti, they developed it, but they got that initial awakening Shakti from their teacher, and then from their teacher.
Mm.
And so when you have a teacher that's a part of a lineage that is, part of a lineage, you're not only getting the instructions and energy from that person, there is this Shakti that's passing through, and so it can be really helpful in that way.
That's why I've, since I graduated from CCA and have gone on to, continue to study in the doctor program, but like but outside of even just in the academic sense, I keep coming back to you, um, because you were that person for me when I was first learning. For me, it started with Ayurveda, but to be honest, I've always, like you, from a very young age, had that. I was leaning toward the spiritual since I, like, my earliest memory was with God. So like maybe 5 years old, and one of my first memories is just talking. I used to just think of it as talking to God, but maybe that's praying, or maybe that is meditating. I'm not sure, but I used to do a lot of sitting in my room and talking to God a lot in a very, very calm, happy way. Not in despair, but in like a, can you hear me? Like, where are you? And it was very cute. Like, looking back, wow, like what a cute thing to do as a kid, and to just feel that presence. But you go through life, right? And then you have all these experiences and all these samskaras and imprints, and like you said, it's so easy to forget, or sometimes the lens gets a little blurry, or a little, other things start to kind of compete for your consciousness. And the spirituality never went away, right? But it was it felt diluted, and then that dissatisfaction came, and then coming back to Ayurveda, I think what really made me stick with it, and what has allowed me to stick with it through my K2, through like just like literally the most uh how to, destabilizing times of my life. But like, has my life ever really been all that stable? I don't know. But the last, since I started studying Ayurveda, what I've definitely been drawn to are the people that actually practice it, and they're how different the qualities of their how they show up. And I was absolutely, what is it, enchanted by how you would be, if that makes sense, right? Like, it's the way that you just can be. As my teacher, I remember you would come into the classroom, and you were just so, there was a quality to it, and I was so curious about that. And it was the only time I had ever seen anything like that, or felt something like that. And then I went to India, shortly after I graduated from the clinical, program at CCA. This was before the internship, but
That was in Kerala.
yeah, yeah. I
Mm,
went to Coimbatore first. I went to Vaidyagrama.
okay.
Um,
Right.
but I think I've shown you my notes from your classes. I wrote, I've tried to like literally transcribe every single word you wrote, or sorry, every single word you said in class. I would try to write it down, and I still have those notebooks. So I'm not over like overestimating the like I was really like you were such a good teacher, and I think that is a marking of a good teacher is when you can keep, we all have like we're all on the spectrum of ADD, I think. But when you can keep students engaged in the material to the point where they don't want to miss like one word of what you're saying, and not only do they not want to miss it, but they want to write it, because when I'm writing it, I'm also storing it into like my deeper memory.
Yeah.
And
I'm the
so
same way. I think
your
it's really important to write when you take notes.
but
Yeah.
your
Sorry.
classes
I
were
mean,
my favorite. Oh no, no, I just wanted to say your classes, the chronic diseases class. I remember that one specifically was so fascinating, and your case studies that you would bring. And then I went to India, and only in India was I starting to meet teachers and Vaidyas that had a similar quality to you. And I was like, this is so great. But the thing that they don't have that Ryan has, and the reason why I keep coming to you and not Vaidyas or teachers in India, is a relatability. And that's going to be different, I think, for everyone. But
right.
because you're in America, maybe, and because, there's just, there's, the accent, sometimes we meet teachers in India and it's like, this is amazing and you're incredible, but like, we didn't grow up the same, and we didn't eat the same foods, and we didn't grow up around the same environment. It's hard for them to understand what it's like growing up here, and the types of, you know, struggles that we have over here. I mean, I'm sure they come visit. There's some incredible ideas, and they come visit and they teach and they lecture in the West. But um, the fact that you've been able to live here and have a spiritual path in life and teach, it's I always find it so hard. I go over to India, I start eating incredibly, sleeping perfectly. I even probably, I don't know, everything is amazing and clean. I get my panchakarma. I'm reading every book. I feel so much energy and so much, my bala is restored, my sat, everything's glowing, right? And then I come back here and it's like, okay, how do I integrate this? And how do I stay connected to this when I'm all the way over here? I'm so far away from India. I'm so far away from those people that had that quality. And you've been my one local, semi local person that I feel that has given me that reminder. And I'm fascinated by how you've been able to do it. I mean, now knowing that you had a guru that you were studying with for many years, that helps me understand how you've been able to maintain and protect that quality and like keep it going. But yeah, it's such a difficult thing. I can really speak to just what it's like to not have um anyone in your direct field, like when you're kind of, I think a lot of people out there might feel like they can relate to this, where they want to live this very sattvic Ayurvedic lifestyle, and they want to practice, Kriya Yoga, and they want to, uh, study and be in the, just be on path and be in alignment with their soul. And they get a lot of distractions and a lot of um, things that interfere with that intention, and the spiral that can happen as a result of that, which I can speak to my own experience, has been like, you can feel frustrated as a pitta, right? Because I'm a pitta. So then I get like frustrated that things are interfering with the what my soul's calling to do, and the energy that I'm feeling called to like live inside of, right? Or like be. And so that brings us back to, well, there's a practice. There's a
Mhm.
practice, and it's just a matter of, I think, for everyone's different, but I think it's a matter of finding and knowing that it is a path of personal responsibility, but also curating it, just as we do in Ayurveda, to work for your life. And like we keep meal times and sleeping, hygiene consistent, perhaps meditating also becomes one of those pillars, right, of our like daily. It's like a daily hygiene for your brain or your mind or your nervous
Absolutely.
system or all the above.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%.
I was thinking
Yeah.
of like maybe how we tie Jyotish into it is talking about the muhurtas, like the best muhurta for meditation. And I just learned the other day that you get up at 4 a.m. So I'm wondering if
Well,
that
I,
has
I don't do
anything to
that
do
every
with.
day. I was on the
Oh,
East
okay.
Coast for a
Got
couple weeks, so it's yeah, a
it.
little.
Jet
I like
lag.
to get up early. I do like to get up
Uh-huh.
early, but yeah, yeah. The best day to meditate is today. Right, and you're talking about like ADD tendencies for a lot of people, and I have my father-in-law. Um, he has ADD or something like that, or my ex-father-in-law, and he said, with ADD, it's about today or not today, about today or not today. Talk about a
Shakespeare.
guru. He said that just kind of playfully and laughed, but I've been thinking about that for years. Today or not today. So yeah, with Jyotish, we don't have to wait for a special day. Right now is good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how
So
about a
maybe.
specific moment? Like, is there a specific moment that we can like anchor?
Yeah. Well, there is. I mean, there's when we get early in the morning, about an hour before the sun comes up, can be a really special time. It can be a little bit earlier than that, but an hour before the electromagnetic energies of the sun and the relationship with the earth and the sun, it's a little bit more quiet. And so that's helpful. But, um, going back to the lifestyle design and working with our dosha, and it's very, what I mean, it's like very individual. And so just we want to be regular first and foremost, so we can just try to set a time aside. This is when I do this. And if I can't meditate, I'm gonna sit. I'm gonna I'm gonna surrender. I'm going to pray. I'm going to read, whatever it is. But we want to be very regular with that. Um, Now, when I was with Roy, and he would always meditate really early in the morning. So we'd get up at 5 and spend a couple hours, and we'd come back in the afternoon. And so that was really helpful. But for me, I found, of course, morning meditations can be amazing. My Where I was able to sink in and relax and really just allow, because of my pitta, was in the evening, right? So it's very individual. We want to do it whenever we can. We want to try to be regular with it, but we might find individually that there's better times, right? So like in the morning, it's great, but if you have a busy schedule and you have kids and you got all this stuff coming up, it's like part of your mind is thinking about that. All right, I have this much time, and then I need to go on to the next thing, right? But in the afternoon or the evening, it's like there's nothing left to do. Like maybe I have to put the
Mm.
dishes away later or whatever, but like there's no pressure. And so then you can, because if you can get into a meditation and where you go, you have the what Roy called the expectation of discovery. So you're in that place. Your thoughts have settled, or you've become unattached from them, and you're in this pure state of being, and you're placing your awareness in your higher brain centers. You might see a light, you might hear inner ear sounds, you might have different things. And so you want to you want to experiment
Mm-hmm.
experiment, there we go, with the process. So if you give yourself time to really sink in and look at that light, and let it absorb into your awareness. You become that light, or you hear that sound and you go, where is it coming from? And it gets louder. And then all of a sudden your awareness yokes with that sound. And these aren't special by their nature. But you start to have these deeper sessions, and you start to have super conscious experiences. And super consciousness sounds very special, like Superman or Superwoman. But super consciousness just means conscious states of awareness that are above ordinary states of awareness. So just by sitting and being quiet, that can be a super conscious state, or seeing a light and blending your awareness, or these kind of things. But the more we have those super conscious experiences, when we come back into our life, um, the harmful patterns of how we think about life or how we interact with life based off of the past, right? Karma, so to speak. We can call it samskaras, right? So there's certain patterns that can be difficult. And just by meditating alone, and just by getting into a quiet place or going a little bit beyond that, it starts to wear down the grooves, if you will, in those patterns. So then you become more and more free, and your awareness begins to expand. And so as that happens, we're able to be more free and have a little bit less suffering each time, right? So I'm sorry, I kind of went on, but anytime is good. Early morning, at least an hour before the sun comes up, that's great. Um, but just doing it anytime, starting with 10 minutes, doing 15, however it is that you can do it, just do it, and just start and try to be regular.
Mhm.
Right. And the biggest part of it is to stay inspired, because that inward spirit, the energy, that's what keeps us motivated, keeps us going, keeps us coming back.
I'm curious
Yeah.
about your work with your clinic. So when you have patients that come in with myriad of different illnesses, of course I'm sure you start, well, not necessarily starting with the chart, but perhaps you start with, just I think Ayurveda is a great like base, right? Like let's look at your diet and lifestyle. Let's look at your relationships and the state of like your ojas and your agni and your ama and your doshas, and assess what's going on with you physiologically. But then, you know, I love how in our sessions you also look at my chart. You're like, okay, well, hey Sasha, I'm going to pull up your chart. I freaking love it. I love it. I adore it. Like I
Me too.
love that that's what you do. And it's like this is, I don't know, a light just goes off in me because I'm like, okay, now we're going to see, now we're really going to see what's going on. And it's just, I think it's the coolest. I am starting to get so super, super into Jyotish.
Yeah.
Like there is something happening. I'm like really wanting to, even right next to me, I have, well, I'm interested in all the different apps. I'm looking at different books. I'm trying to learn about the different nakshatras. I'm just fascinated by it. I more and more just yoga and Ayurveda are like for me it's like peanut butter and jelly. They just work
Yeah.
so well. They are obviously yoga too, but um, in a clinical setting, like when you're working with clients, um, how do you? Well, I know I can kind of provide the testimony to how we work together, but like you infuse the the Jyotish and the spiritual guidance through the Kriya Yoga. Like I feel like you do such a great job of merging everything together. Do you do that with every client? Like do you have a process, or is it you just kind of know who's ready to see and
Yeah. It is different for each person. And
mhm.
a lot of people, when they hear the word Jyotish or astrology, it makes them think of like Western astrology. And so like this kind of ungrounded woo woo sort of thing in their life, at least. And they say, I don't believe in astrology. And that's because they're smart, right? So they're thinking, they, so I don't push that on a lot of people at all. And, um, but I always love to, like when I can look at, because Jyotish, even though we can define it as astrology, it's so vast. It's the eyes of the Vedas, and it gives us this ability, or can give us a very clear and precise ability to see kind of what's going on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or the influences. So I think it's just, I think it's so helpful, but it's not. I think it's important to mention that with Jyotish, when we're looking at, looking at someone's birth chart and this kind of thing, we're looking at planets and houses and signs, and this complex language of looking at our circumstances in time and space. But it's not the planets that are causing it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
well, you got you got Mars, in Taurus with Jupiter, and so the language will often sound like Mars is controlling, or Mars is causing this, or Jupiter is causing this. But no, the chart itself and where the planets are, it's just a mirror, right? So as above, so below, or as below, so above. And so when we look at a chart, we're just looking at a mirror of possibilities, right? Of our karma. And so the planets aren't controlling us. They just allow us to perceive um, into life in a really unique way. And it gives us a language to describe that. And I think it's so helpful. Because as you know, people go through all kinds of stuff, and sometimes they're not going to tell you what they're going through, but you can see it in the chart. You say, hey, what's going on about this? And they just feel seen. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wait a minute, you can see that in the chart, that kind of thing. It's like, yeah. And so they feel seen, and they don't feel so alone. And then they feel like, you know, um, you feel connected to the larger reality, so I think it can be really helpful. But yeah, no, I don't look at charts for everyone. I'd like to read their chart first, before we do an intake, because my Ayurvedic intake's about 90 minutes. And so that's a million questions. So if they want their chart read,
Mm-hmm.
I like to do that first, so they don't think that I'm just repeating back to them what they've already
Mm-hmm.
told me. You go in kind of fresh. But if you can work with their dosha and what's going on with their body and with their constitution, and looking at their dasha and the influences of Saturn, this gives us a very clear path forward as far as what are the challenges, how can we work with them. It's a phenomenal tool, and Sasha, it's really worth learning. Just you'll learn it quick. I know you. You just want to give yourself time. It takes most people about 3 to 5 years to, like, kind of get that it's a language. So it's like the neural networks of our brain, building it and being able to, like, use it to see. Um, but it's really worth
If I can be your disciple, then I'll study Jyotish. No, but
it.
seriously, where do we? I mean, it's difficult to really truly learn the Vedas to just do a self study. Like this is the reason I have gone the academic route, is hoping to find obviously embodied teachers that are living it, but you know it's difficult. Like I can speak to the experience at CCA. I think the classes were what, like 3 days a week, and it was like 3 hours 3 days a week, which isn't very much. And then, like, in person, and then I transferred to Kerala, and then COVID hit and everything became online. And then you're not really getting the essence, right? Like it's not being transmitted as powerfully through the computer as if you were in person with your teachers. So I think I really, really hope that we don't lose the discipleship lineage tradition to technology, because I know people love the convenience of technology, but my when I've learned the most, like my most powerful experiences with Ayurveda, Jyotish, yoga, spirituality, God, have been at the feet of the teacher every time.
Yeah, I think it's a really good place, but also, and also, um, I think you could, I think you maybe possibly could say that same statement and go, except the stuff I learned on my own too,
True.
through experience, right?
Oh yeah.
And so they're both so important, you
Yeah.
know, to have the teachings, have those aha moments, but then it's getting out there and having the faith to just do it, to go for it, and to, experiment with the process, learn from it, all that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
With meditation, with Jyotish, with Ayurveda, with being a parent, experiment with it. That
Hmm.
sounds funny, but yeah, that's the process, you know.
Hmm. Well, I know we've been on for over an hour, and I know at a certain point you
Oh,
start
cool.
to like to see double. Maybe you're seeing like four of me or something. But I wanted to ask you perhaps a good place to conclude. I could ask you a million more questions, and you know how we can talk for like days on end about all of this because it's a fascinating place to be, and our consciousness naturally wants to go there. So it's really, really fun to visit there with a teacher, a friend, a colleague. I mean, I feel like you've become all those things to me. But um, I think a really good place to perhaps conclude it would be to ask you about your daily practices and how you implement everything into your life, because I know your schedule is busy. It's packed. You have kids, you have a clinic, you teach, you travel, um, and you do a lot of things. You help a lot of people, and you're popular. It took a long time to get you on the podcast for that reason. You were the hardest person to book. I know. I know you're busy. So how do you keep everything intact, all these practices? Or what might like a day in the life of Ryan Strong, like you wake up, what happens? You meditate, of
Yeah,
course.
well, yeah, that's one of the very first things, right? So often we'll get up and I'll typically drink some tea or something like that, and I shower. You know, um, my family, I'm famous in my family for taking 2 showers a day or more. It may
Huh.
be a little wasteful with water, but sometimes they're short. But in the morning, it just helps me revive,
Mm-hmm.
from sleep, and it makes me feel refreshed. And so I will always meditate in the morning, and I will always meditate in the afternoon or evening, right? And sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short, but I make time um, once a week or several times a month to try to do something longer, and that's with that experimenting with the process and being able to just sit, and just be. And so that's really important. I'm regular with my meals. Sometimes I won't eat breakfast. If my Agni is, I pit a kapha, so sometimes I don't need to. If my kapha is getting up, poking its head up a little bit, I'm not hungry in the morning, and I won't eat breakfast, or I'll have something very light. Um, and so yeah, it's pretty simple. It's just I sleep well. I wake up early. I meditate. Um, Again, meditating at least twice a day, and then I have my Kriya practices that I also do. But I think the most important practice that I have, and it took a long time to have it, is to banish, to have banished, as what Roy suggested in person in his writings. He said, remove the idea, banish the idea that there is a separation between the physical and the spiritual, because there is no separation from it. There's just the spiritual, right? And we hear that word spiritual. Sometimes it can sound fantastic, right? But this is reality. We're talking about reality, and it's this. We abide in this infinite creation that is one thing, and uh, and when we can remember that and just be established in that, no matter what we're doing, if we're at an airport waiting for 3 days, or if we are, whatever it is, it's like you're in your spiritual practice right now, right? You're in your spiritual practice right now, and the thing about it, it's like once we can get into a place where we feel connected, right? And in a small way or a big way, we feel that oneness consciousness. We feel like, or we feel like we are, our heart is open to this reality, and we are interacting with it on a constant basis. And because our heart is open, we feel what we need to do, what we don't need to do. And so it becomes a little bit spontaneous, because how you interact or what you do or you don't do becomes a little bit in the moment. Right? You still could be regular with everything, but your heart is open, and you're experiencing this interaction or this oneness, and you know what to do. And it's not like words. It's just your heart kind of informs your consciousness, that kind of thing. And so it's so helpful, because you feel you feel restored, you feel balanced, you feel uplifted, all these really positive things. But then when you get off of it, right? So make a decision that your heart told you, but you did something other. You go, well, I have to kind of do this anyways, or I think it's like we can get thrown off. And as soon as we feel off, as soon as we go, oh, that wasn't right for me, it's to take the time to get back to that place. And usually that just means stepping back from what's going on. It's amazing what can happen in 2 days of just being like, just letting everything, turning off the phone and just letting everything sort of settle, or whatever it is for the person. For me, it's, I like to go backpacking. I like to spend time in nature. But if you live in that way, you follow that you find that you find a way to establish yourself in your life where you just feel what I was talking about before. Then what you do is like spontaneous and it's supportive. And then if it's not, you know it, and you go the other direction. I know that wasn't the clearest of answers, but it's kind of like that.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was actually another one of the questions I wanted to ask you. What key lessons have you learned from your guru, which you kind of just answered? The key lesson, the banishing of the illusion that, the physical and the spiritual are separate. That's a really, really good,
Yeah,
just
that's why
like
he didn't
nugget.
take, he didn't have a spiritual name. And when you'd see him in person, he would be in a suit and tie often. Or if he was being casual, he was just dressed casually, but he didn't wear any, like when he would initiate and do formal services, he would wear a robe, and he had his rudakshras. But other than that, he never appeared outwardly spiritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because his whole thing was that this is for everyone. This is our natural state. And if we, especially in our culture, but other places, if we think that if I dress like this, I'm not spiritual, but if I dress like this, I am. If I have
Right.
a regular name, I'm spiritual. I'm not spiritual, but if I have this special name, I am. And these things aren't, how we dress and our name. These things aren't, it's not the thing itself that can be important. It's just this division, this duality that we often create. And so when we're looking at Kriya Yoga, Ayurveda, Jyotish, we in our culture, it's from a foreign culture, these terms, these words, but we're talking about reality. And in the Vedas, I feel like they give the best descriptions. Like they had the best way to describe that reality that I know of, right? Like really in depth, scholarly, millennia, these things combined, and you have these amazing traditions and lineages and just so much information. But all they are doing is describing a reality that is here for everyone. That is that is not foreign. It's God isn't written in a Sanskrit word. It's not. I mean, the word might be, but that's all it is a word. It's like being at a restaurant and thinking that the food on the reading the menu is what you're going to get. Those are words to describe the food. The food is something you eat. right? And so, anyways, yeah, I think that that's one of the most important. I could go on about how many things Roy helped me with or slapped me around about. You know,
That
not
would be
really, but
fun.
he could be stern. He could be stern. He could, you know, that kind of thing. But he was always very kind and loving. But yeah.
And now you pass the torch, right? Or you hold, sorry, no, you're not even passing the torch yet. You're holding the torch. He passed it on to you.
Yeah, I was ordained to carry the lineage in 2011, and it was the same year my son was born, and so it was a special year for me. But I wasn't ready to start teaching then, you know. But he lived to be 87, and so um, around the time of being ordained, it was kind of under the understanding that he might not be here so long, and so we got to take care. It was like we got to take care of this business, you know. Maybe you're not ready to go out there and start doing this right now, but at least you have the certificate or the blessing.
Right. Right.
Make it official.
They made it into a ceremony, you know.
Hmm.
It was symbolic.
It was, yeah,
Do you
yeah,
feel ready
yeah.
now? Now that you're in your
Oh yeah,
Saturn?
yeah, I've been teaching for years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, when I went into Ayurveda, I wanted to know so much about Ayurveda. It was so exciting, and same thing with Jyotish. But it was always, I thought like, okay, I need to get a job, or I need to like have make a living. And so, how does a yogi make a living? And I thought, all right, Ayurveda or Jyotish, and so now it's all about like, okay, how do I go forward teaching now? And so yeah, like you said, Saturn, it's a new it's a new chapter. When
Well,
do you
I
go
know
to
you
India?
probably. Oh, I leave for India in about 6 weeks.
Okay,
6 weeks, and I will be there for a long time.
cool.
I have this um, kind of arbitrary return. The other two times I've been to India, I got one way tickets. Um, the first time was cut short by COVID. The second time because visas were like very very restricted with how long it was still kind of 2022 was still kind of COVID era.
Right.
So they were just allowing finally people to come into India, but like on a I could only be there for 2 months, which for some people might feel like a really long time. For me, it's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
I just start getting into it at 2 months, you know. So I will be there probably my longest, at least 4 months, but I have a feeling I'm going to be there a long time because I'll be finishing, like I mentioned to you, I think it
Yeah.
was yesterday, the doctor program that I've been in for the past, God, 8,000 years. So,
Well, congratulations. I hope
oh,
you have a great trip.
thank
I hope
you.
it's wonderful and it goes easeful
Mm,
and you get to eat a lot of wonderful food and
mm.
rest.
Yes, the pit of fire has
Yeah.
been burning strongly. Very, which I'm grateful for, right? Like it's not all, you know, it's a blessing. I think who was I reminding the other day that we're so lucky that we're given the blessing to learn this knowledge.
Yeah.
Wow, because it does transform you. I mean, year after year. I mean, you've known me. I don't know how long we met in. What was it? I think it was 2018 or 2019, maybe. Yeah, I think it was 2019. Was it 2018? Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah,
2018.
I think it was 2018. And now it's 2024. Have you noticed a difference? I hope somewhat of a
Yes,
transfer.
absolutely.
I'm laughing 'cause it's been a long road. And I also just remember like those early classes with you and my I just have like really funny memories with you. How like there was this one class where you were like, I don't think I'm going to be able to finish the slides today, you guys. I think there's just too many slides, and we'll just conclude with like I don't know. We'll just conclude with this, and you could you said to the whole class, you were like, Sasha's looking at me. I think she's gonna throw a chair across the room or something.
we 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 finished those slides, didn't we?
We did.
Hmm.
We did, but
Yeah.
I laughed. I mean, I had like such an internal deep laugh and giggle because you also let me see like you also helped me laugh at myself.
Good.
Like you really helped me learn to like see it's okay. Like it's kind of, and now I'm able to do that with my patients, with my students, with my anyone in my life. I'm able to help them do that now because you helped me do that.
Good.
So the pitta. But yeah, the India trip is coming and it's going to be incredible. Do you have any India or any travels coming up on your end? Spiritual conquests?
Um, no such thing. Everything is
Mm,
spiritual. No.
everything. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
No, I don't. I don't mean to be cheesy. Yeah. No, I'm kind of bi-coastal now, so I'm on the um, in Massachusetts for 2 weeks every 6 weeks. So my son lives in Sacramento,
Oh.
so I'm here in Sacramento for 6 weeks, and then I'm in Massachusetts with my partner Shalene Tatro for 2 weeks, and so that's where the Panchakarma Center is now. It's in beautiful Massachusetts, kind of near Vermont, so people get a real retreat away from the world. And so so that keeps me busy, doing that.
Partner or
Oh yeah,
partner?
partner, both.
Ah! Okay, well,
Yeah.
Mazel Tov, because that's news. So
Oh, you didn't
that's
know
so
that?
exciting. No,
Oh, I told you.
no, no, no. I knew she was helping you schedule with things for a while, and it's so funny because
Yeah,
Shalyn was my. Is it Shaylin or Shaylin?
Shalene.
Yeah, Shalyn. That's what I thought
Shalene.
because yeah, Shalyn.
I call her
Um,
Shay Shay sometimes, just for fun.
oh, that's cute. That's so cute. Um, yeah, she was my supervisor. So yeah, that's like such an incredible partnership that I'm
Yeah,
so happy for you guys.
thanks. Yeah, it's hard being in different coasts, or not coasts, kind of actually, but yeah, different parts of the country, but we make it work. We're very lucky.
And she has a daughter. So your
Yeah,
kids can,
exactly. So exactly. Yeah.
hmm. Well, okay, we can leave it on that like loving, beautiful shout out to Shalyn. We love you. This is such a beautiful, piece of news that I'm learning. And I love both of you as teachers, as people. And, love plays a huge part, I think, in the support for continuing the Dharma. Like I think having
Yeah.
support, having people, not just teachers, but love in any way that it shows up in your life, I think is a huge source of strength and inspiration for us. And, love comes in so many different forms and it's so nourishing for the
Oh
Ojas.
yeah, Venus.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's my new
There's the
nickname
Venus
since I'm
Dasa talking.
right, right.
There it
Right.
is.
I'm the hopeless romantic. Gonna fly
No,
off
I know
into
it's good. I was we were talking yesterday. We were talking about Venus Dasha, and you're like, well, I don't know, but the way you were just describing things, that's all I meant. It was very
mm,
Venus.
hmm. Yeah. I have yet to well, maybe I'm more Venusy than I realize right now.
Hmm. Just give it time. Give it time.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being
Thanks for having
you.
me. Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you
so
for
much.
everything.
My pleasure.
Sorry, there's a slight delay. As
Hmm.
every time I start to like say thank you, it's like, yeah, but I yeah, you've just been incredible. This was a great conversation. I think everything you've shared, your experiences, your knowledge, and but just more importantly, your essence is so appreciated. And I know it will. It's just so cool to think that one day I'll be listening to this and I'll be like, wow, I finally got him on the podcast, and now this can like live you can listen to your teacher's voice anytime. And I think it's just a source of comfort too, to hear a person's voice that is a source of comfort for you,
It's
So,
for me. It's
mhm.
for me. Yeah. Thanks, Sasha. Thanks for having me. Safe travels. Stay in touch.
Thank you for listening to Ojas Oasis with Sasha Bershadsky. To learn more about Ayurvedic healing, please visit ojasoasis.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, have your smile.